Good morning. Thank you very much for coming in this morning. Yeah, we've seen your statement that you've issued, but just to share with our viewers your overriding response to what's been unfolding on the border with Gaza since yesterday.
Well, I think it's really a question of Israeli bad faith. We've seen a 50-year occupation now of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, not to mention a 10-year siege of Gaza. As Professor Stremlau just mentioned, the United States is not an honest broker or mediator at all. The United States is fanning the flames of division and of friction. Now, to look at the Gazan protests in context, we must understand that over 70% of the Gazans demonstrating, they come from families who were expelled in 1948 from various towns and villages in Palestine and forced into exile in a very small part of Palestine, which was Gaza, which was then under Egyptian rule. So the Palestinians in Gaza in particular are a dispossessed and impoverished people who are merely stating the obvious, that having been made refugees, they have the right to return to their original homes.
We spoke earlier, my colleague Yuveka spoke earlier to the board of South African Jewish Board of Deputies. They say that in their view, South Africa's action by pulling out the ambassador in Israel is like targeting the Jewish state and is aiding what they call extremism by Hamas, which currently is like the leading political force in Gaza. What's your view?
Simply to remind you that in the early 1970s when Hamas was founded, Israel supported Hamas so as to divide the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was then headed by al-Fatah, and that Israel has played divide and rule tactics. Now, if it feels that the chickens are coming home to roost, it's hardly the time to complain. The fact is, though, that recall of the South African ambassador is a very timely move to show that South Africa must side with the Palestinians who have been dispossessed, and Israel refuses to enter into bona fide negotiations over the status of Palestine and the status of the refugees. So we welcome that action.
Now, as an outsider to the Jewish community, now you represent South African Jews for a free Palestine. There's clearly, therefore, not a unity in terms of the Jewish community and how you view this scenario. The gentleman from the Jewish Board of Deputies that we spoke to earlier was actually, you say, when we asked about your plan today for your members to march in Cape Town today in support of the people of Palestine, as you've condemned this violence by the Israeli armed forces against the people of Gaza. He said, well, like in apartheid South Africa, there were blacks who supported the homelands and stuff like that, pretty much like they sold out. Are you selling out on a Jewish mission here?
No, we're certainly not selling out. In fact, we would say that in terms of Jewish history and Jewish values, that we are more authentically the representatives of that Jewish ethos than the South African Board of Deputies, or the Jewish Board of Deputies, in that the right-wing formations, almost the semi-fascist formations of the Zionist movement have taken control, as it were, of the Jewish establishment organizations. So that what is unity when it's founded on immorality? And I speak of the Israeli government's immorality. So we certainly don't believe that we are dividing a community on a false basis, quite the contrary.
So do you support the South African government's decision to pull its ambassador out of Tel Aviv?
Most definitely.
Why?
It's time that South Africa took a clear stand, not simply on Palestine. There are other issues too, where the South African government should be more proactive. There's certainly not time to go into these other hotspots, so to speak. But the fact that we, as a former apartheid society, struggling to overcome the legacies of that very, very criminal background, have not played a more active role is something that really we should be looking out for.
Now, in the march in Cape Town that we are planning for today, what will be the main thrust of that? I mean, we know sometimes protest marches end with a memorandum of sorts, but your members, those who are affiliated to your cause in Cape Town today, what will be the main thrust of their
march? The march is undertaken and organized by many different organizations. We simply are one of them. The fact is that the right of return of the Palestinian refugees is a key issue, something that the Israelis have tried to push aside for 70 years since the initial expulsion in 1948. The second issue really is to prompt the South African government to be more proactive. That's why this latest example of recall of our ambassador is very welcome news, and we believe there should be more action taken in support of the BDS movement, a non-violent movement to put increased pressure on the Israeli government to negotiate in good faith. We are not saying what the final result of that negotiation should be, but the fact is that the creeping annexation of the remainder of Palestine, which is still settled by a majority of Palestinians, and of course the annexation of East Jerusalem now, is extremely counterproductive.
Now, before you leave, Mr. Howitz, just a quick one. We've seen Donald Trump putting the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, and that has led to these protest actions. Do you think this act by Washington has really now scuppered any other efforts at this stage for a peaceful resolution or a long-lasting settlement in the Middle East?
Well, it's certainly a signal that negotiation is not a route for the Palestinians. If you want people to give up their rights and expect them to disappear, that's not going to happen. So for the Palestinians, Trump's move, which of course is one of many backward moves by the United States, is just fanning the fire to say there's only one way, which is protest and war. And of course, those of us who believe that there should be a peaceful solution, that is why we support BDS. But the United States, as unfortunately is always the case, is not a partner for peace or for resolution.
What's BDS again?
The boycott, divestment and sanctions movement.
Thank you very much.
To put that pressure on Israel.
That's the spokesperson of the South African Jews for a Free Palestine, Howitz.